The year was 1963, and the small town of Hollow Creek in New England lay shrouded in mystery. The fog rolled in thick from the mountains, casting eerie shadows across the cobblestone streets. Hollow Creek was the kind of place where secrets lingered in the air, and whispers carried tales of old haunts and forgotten feuds. I had made a life for myself as a history teacher at the local community college, but the past had a way of creeping up on you, especially in a town like this. My name is Miguel Vasquez, and my journey to America from Mexico had been driven by a quest for a healthier life and new opportunities. It was here that fate introduced me to Elliot Brooks, a private detective whose reputation preceded him. Elliot had an uncanny ability to read people, to see beyond the surface and understand their motivations with little more than a glance. Our paths had crossed numerous times, and each case seemed to bind our friendship even tighter. It was on one such foggy evening that the call came. I was grading papers in my small, cluttered office when the phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the silence. I picked up the receiver to hear Elliot's familiar voice on the other end. "Miguel, we have a new case," he said, his voice tinged with urgency. "A series of mysterious deaths in Hollow Creek, and the local police are stumped. They need our help." I quickly gathered my things and headed out, the cool night air biting at my skin as I made my way to Elliot's office. His office was a modest space, filled with books, case files, and the scent of strong coffee. As I entered, Elliot was already reviewing the details of the case, his sharp eyes scanning the reports with unwavering focus. The first victim was a local farmer, found in his barn. Elliot began, gesturing to a stack of photographs on his desk. His body was contorted in a grotesque manner, and there were no signs of struggle. The townsfolk are convinced it's the work of an ancient spirit. I picked up one of the photographs, studying the eerie scene. The barn was a cluttered mess, with tools scattered across the floor and hay bales stacked haphazardly. The farmer's lifeless body lay in the center, his face frozen in a grimace of terror. It was clear that this was no ordinary murder. Elliot continued, "The local police have no leads, and the townsfolk are growing more fearful by the day. We need to get to Hollow Creek and start our investigation." We set off for Hollow Creek early the next morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon as we drove through the winding mountain roads. The town greeted us with a heavy silence, the air thick with an unspoken tension. It was a quaint place, with its cobblestone streets and historic buildings, but there was an underlying sense of foreboding that seemed to permeate every corner. Our first stop was the local police station, where we met with Sheriff Tom Jenkins, a burly man with a stern expression and weary eyes. He welcomed us into his office, offering a brief nod of gratitude. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Vasquez," Sheriff Jenkins said, his voice gruff. "We've never seen anything like this in Hollow Creek. The townsfolk are terrified, and I don't know how much longer we can keep things under control." Elliot leaned forward, his expression serious. "Sheriff, I need to see the crime scene and any evidence you have. We need to understand what we're dealing with." The sheriff led us to the farmer's barn, the scene of the first murder. As we stepped inside, the air grew colder, and the scent of decay hung heavy. Elliot's keen eyes surveyed the scene, taking in every detail: the broken lantern, the odd markings on the wooden beams, and the cold, unwelcoming air. "This isn't just a simple murder, Miguel," Elliot murmured, his voice filled with a mix of curiosity and dread. "There's something more here." Our investigation led us to the town's historical society, a small, dusty building filled with old books and forgotten relics. We were greeted by Mrs. Agnes Turner, the town's historian, who was more than happy to share her wealth of knowledge. "Hollow Creek has a long and storied past," Mrs. Turner began, her voice quivering with age. "The town was founded on ancient burial grounds, and tales of vengeful spirits have been passed down through generations." She led us to a corner of the room, where an old map of the town was pinned to the wall. "These markings," she pointed to a series of symbols on the map, are said to be protective sigils, meant to keep the spirits at bay. But over the years, some of them have been lost or forgotten. Elliot's eyes narrowed as he studied the map. Mrs. Turner, do you have any records of family feuds or conflicts that might have led to these deaths? Mrs. Turner hesitated, her eyes darting nervously. There was a bitter feud between two prominent families in Hollow Creek, dating back to the town's founding, the Carters and the Harrises. Their animosity ran deep, and there was much bloodshed. Some say the spirits of those who died in the feud still linger, seeking vengeance. We spent the next few days poring over old records and interviewing the descendants of the feuding families. The more we learned, the more it became clear that the deaths were not random, but connected to this old family feud. The symbols we found at the crime scenes were part of an ancient ritual, a desperate attempt to invoke spirits for vengeance. Our investigation took us to the local cemetery, where the tombstones of the Carters and the Harrises stood as silent witnesses to the past. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, and as we examined the graves, we noticed the same cryptic symbols etched into the stone. Elliot's skills in reading people were invaluable as we navigated the delicate web of family secrets and hidden grudges. The descendants of the feuding families were reluctant to speak about the past, but with each conversation, we uncovered more about the deep-seated animosity that had festered for generations. One evening, as we walked back to our hotel, Elliot turned to me, his expression grave. "Miguel, we're dealing with something far more dangerous than we initially thought. This isn't just about a haunting or a family feud. There's a sinister force at play, and we need to uncover the truth before more lives are lost." His words hung heavy in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of discovering something that would change everything we thought we knew about Hollow Creek. The shadows that loomed over the town seemed to grow darker, and I knew that our journey was only just beginning. As we delved deeper into the mystery of Hollow Creek, it became apparent that the deaths were not random acts of violence. There was a pattern, a chilling connection that linked them all to an old family feud that had simmered beneath the surface for generations. The symbols we found at the crime scenes were not merely random marks. They were part of an ancient ritual, a desperate attempt to invoke spirits for vengeance. Elliot's meticulous nature led us to a series of old letters hidden in the archives of the Historical Society. The letters detailed a bitter feud between two prominent families in Hollow Creek, the Carters and the Harrises, dating back to the town's founding. The feud had escalated into violence, and the bloodshed had left a lasting stain on the town's history. As we read through the letters, the depth of the animosity between the families became clear, and it was evident that the recent deaths were not just coincidental. One particular letter, dated from the late 1800s, caught our attention. It was a chilling account of a confrontation between the two families, resulting in the deaths of several members on both sides. The writer described the scene in vivid detail, mentioning the same cryptic symbols that we had found at the crime scenes. The symbols were part of a ritual believed to summon spirits to aid in their quest for vengeance. "This letter is the key, Miguel," Elliot said, his eyes gleaming with determination. "It confirms that the symbols are part of a ritual, and it connects the recent deaths to the old feud. We need to find out more about this ritual and who might be performing it now." Our investigation took us to the descendants of the Carters and the Harrises, who still lived in Hollow Creek. Their reluctance to speak about the past was palpable, and it became clear that the wounds of the feud had never truly healed. Each conversation revealed more about the deep-seated animosity that had festered for generations. We first visited the Carter family, who lived in a grand old mansion on the outskirts of town. Mr. Jonathan Carter, the current head of the family, was a stern man with a no-nonsense attitude. He greeted us with a cold stare, clearly reluctant to delve into the painful history of his family. "We don't talk about the past," Mr. Carter said, his voice firm. "What's done is done. There's no point in dredging up old grudges." "But Mr. Carter," Elliot pressed gently, "the recent deaths are connected to the old feud, We need to understand what happened back then to prevent more bloodshed. Mr. Carter's expression softened slightly, and he sighed. Very well. I'll tell you what I know, but you won't find anything good in those old stories. As he spoke, Mr. Carter recounted the bitter history of the Carter-Harris feud. It had begun over a disputed piece of land, escalating into violence and bloodshed that had torn the town apart. The feud had claimed many lives, and the scars it left were still felt by the descendants. Our next stop was the Harris family, who lived in a modest farmhouse near the center of town. Mrs. Abigail Harris welcomed us with a warm smile, but her eyes held a sadness that spoke of a painful past. The feud between our families has haunted us for generations, Mrs. Harris said softly. My grandfather used to tell me stories of the violence and the hatred. It's a legacy of pain that we can't seem to escape. As we listened to Mrs. Harris, it became clear that both families were still deeply affected by the events of the past. The symbols we found at the crime scenes were not just marks of a ritual. They were reminders of the old wounds that had never healed. Elliot's skills in reading people were invaluable as we navigated the delicate web of family secrets and hidden grudges. The more we learned, the more we realized that the haunting was not just a manifestation of old legends, but a reflection of the unresolved conflicts that had shaped the town's history. We visited the local cemetery, where the tombstones of the Carters and the Harrises stood as silent witnesses to the past. The air was heavy with a sense of foreboding, and as we examined the graves, we noticed the same cryptic symbols etched into the stone. It was clear that the ritual was deeply intertwined with the town's history, and its influence extended far beyond the present. Elliot and I spent hours studying the symbols, trying to decipher their meaning. We pored over ancient texts and consulted with experts in the occult, seeking answers to the questions that haunted us. The more we learned, the more it became clear that the ritual was designed to invoke powerful spirits, using the energy of the feud to fuel their vengeance. One evening, as we walked back to our hotel, Elliot turned to me, his expression grave. Miguel, we're dealing with something far more dangerous than we initially thought. This isn't just about a haunting or a family feud. There's a sinister force at play, and we need to uncover the truth before more lives are lost. His words hung heavy in the air, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of discovering something that would change everything we thought we knew about Hollow Creek. The shadows that loomed over the town seemed to grow darker, and I knew that our journey was only just beginning. Our investigation led us to the town's historical archives, where we continued to uncover more about the feud and the ritual. We found records of other deaths that had occurred over the years, all marked by the same symbols and eerie circumstances. It was as if the ritual had been performed periodically, each time leaving a trail of death and fear in its wake. Elliot's meticulous nature and sharp mind were invaluable as we pieced together the fragments of the past. He analyzed every detail, uncovering connections that others might have missed. His ability to see beyond the surface and understand the deeper motivations of people and events was a skill that set him apart as a detective. As we delved deeper into the mystery, we began to notice a pattern. The deaths occurred at specific intervals, aligning with certain celestial events. It was clear that the ritual was carefully timed to harness the power of these events, amplifying the spirit's energy and their thirst for vengeance. We sought the help of Dr. Evelyn Moore, an expert in ancient rituals and the occult. Dr. Moore was a brilliant scholar with a deep understanding of the dark arts. She welcomed us into her study, a room filled with old books and arcane artifacts. The ritual you're describing is known as the Rite of Vengeance, Dr. Moore explained, her eyes gleaming with knowledge. It's an ancient practice believed to summon powerful spirits to exact revenge on those who have wronged you. The symbols you found are part of the incantation, and the deaths are a result of the spirit's wrath. How can we stop it? Elliot asked, his voice determined. How do we break the cycle of death and fear? Dr. Moore's expression grew serious. To break the cycle, you must perform a counter-ritual, one that will dispel the spirits and nullify the power of the original ritual. But be warned, it is a dangerous undertaking. The spirits will not relinquish their hold easily. Armed with this new knowledge, Elliot and I knew that our next step was to find the person or persons performing the ritual. We needed to uncover their identity and stop them before they could claim more lives. Our investigation brought us face to face with the cult's enforcers, who were willing to do anything to protect their secrets. Elliot's skills in martial arts and self-defense were put to the test as we faced threats lurking in the shadows, determined to silence us before we could expose their dark practices. It was a battle of wits and wills, with each step bringing us closer to uncovering the hidden truth. The cult's influence extended far and wide, and it became clear that we were up against a formidable adversary. As we continued our search, we encountered resistance at every turn. The townsfolk, influenced by the cult's power, were reluctant to help us, and we faced threats both seen and unseen. But Elliot's unyielding determination and keen mind kept us on the right path, and we knew that we had to see this through to the end. The shadows that loomed over Hollow Creek seemed to grow darker with each passing day, and the sense of foreboding was ever present. The town's secrets were slowly coming to light, and the truth was within our grasp. We knew that we had to uncover the identity of the person behind the ritual and put an end to the cycle of death and fear that had plagued Hollow Creek for generations. As we pressed on, the stakes grew higher and the danger more palpable. But with each step, we grew more determined to uncover the truth and bring justice to the victims of the past. The haunting at Hollow Creek was far from over, and our journey had only just begun. As Elliot and I delved deeper into the case, the line between friend and foe became increasingly blurred. Hollow Creek was a town with many secrets, and it seemed that everyone had something to hide. The recent deaths were not random acts of violence, but orchestrated by a sinister cult deeply entrenched in the town. Its members hid in plain sight, their influence reaching far and wide. The cult's members were influential figures in Hollow Creek, blending seamlessly into society. Their leader, a charismatic figure with a dark past, had been using the ancient rituals to manipulate and control the townsfolk. The symbols we found were part of their ritualistic practices, designed to invoke fear and obedience. Our investigation brought us face to face with the cult's enforcers. These men and women were willing to do anything to protect their secrets, and their loyalty to the cult was unwavering. One evening, as we walked through the dimly lit streets, we were ambushed by two of the cult's enforcers. They were burly men, dressed in dark clothing, their faces hidden by hoods. Elliot's skills in martial arts and self-defense were put to the test as we faced off against our attackers. With swift, calculated movements, he disarmed one of the men, his eyes focused and determined. I did my best to fend off the second attacker, using the techniques Elliot had taught me over the years. The struggle was intense, but we managed to overpower the enforcers, leaving them unconscious in the alleyway. As we caught our breath, Elliot turned to me, his expression grim. "This was a warning, Miguel. They're trying to scare us off, but we can't let them win. We need to find out who's behind this and put an end to their schemes." We continued our search, each step bringing us closer to the truth. Our investigation led us to a seemingly abandoned building on the outskirts of town. The windows were boarded up, and the walls were covered in graffiti. It was a place that reeked of neglect and decay, but we knew it held the answers we sought. Inside the building, we found a hidden room, its walls adorned with the same cryptic symbols we had seen at the crime scenes. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and candles flickered in the dim light. In the center of the room was an altar, covered in a dark cloth and adorned with various artifacts. It was clear that this was the cult's meeting place, where they conducted their dark rituals. Elliot's eyes scanned the room, taking in every detail. "We need to find evidence that links this place to the recent deaths," he said, his voice determined. "There has to be something here that can help us." As we searched the room, we found a collection of old books and documents, their pages filled with descriptions of ancient rituals and incantations. One book in particular caught our attention. Its cover was worn and faded, but the title was clear: The Rite of Vengeance. Inside, we found detailed instructions on how to perform the ritual, along with illustrations of the symbols we had seen. "This is it, Miguel," Elliot said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and dread. "This book contains everything we need to know about the ritual. It confirms our suspicions and gives us the information we need to stop it." As we continued to search the room, we found a list of names, each one marked with a symbol. It was a chilling discovery, as the names on the list included the recent victims and several other townsfolk. It was clear that the cult had planned to continue their ritualistic killings, targeting those who opposed them or posed a threat to their power. Elliot and I knew that we needed to act quickly. Armed with the knowledge we had gained, we returned to the police station to share our findings with Sheriff Jenkins. The sheriff listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each passing moment. "This is worse than I thought," Sheriff Jenkins said, his voice heavy with concern. "We need to arrest the cult members and put a stop to their activities before they can claim more lives." The sheriff assembled a team of officers, and we led them to the abandoned building. The cult members were caught off guard, their dark secrets laid bare for all to see. As the officers apprehended the members, Elliot and I searched for the cult's leader. We knew that without capturing the leader, the danger would not be truly eliminated. Our search led us to the town's grand old church, a place that had once been a sanctuary for the townsfolk. As we approached the entrance, we heard the faint sound of chanting, a low, rhythmic murmur that sent chills down our spines. The cult's leader was performing a ritual, attempting to summon the spirits once more. Elliot and I entered the church, our footsteps echoing through the vast, empty space. At the altar, we saw the cult's leader, a tall figure cloaked in dark robes. His face was obscured by a hood, but his presence was unmistakable. He raised his arms, chanting in a language that sounded ancient and otherworldly. "Stop right there," Elliot called out, his voice firm and commanding. "It's over. Your cult has been exposed, and your followers are in custody. Surrender now, and we can avoid any more bloodshed." The leader turned to face us, his eyes gleaming with a malevolent intensity. "You think you can stop me?" he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "The spirits are with me. They will not allow you to interfere." With a swift motion, the leader drew a dagger from his robes and lunged at us. Elliot reacted with lightning speed, deflecting the attack and engaging in a fierce struggle with the leader. The clash of steel echoed through the church as they fought, each move calculated and precise. As the battle raged on, I noticed the symbols on the altar beginning to glow, their light growing brighter and more intense. It was clear that the ritual was nearing completion, and the spirits were growing stronger. I knew that we had to act quickly to stop the ritual before it was too late. Drawing on the knowledge we had gained from the ancient texts, I began to chant the counter-ritual, my voice steady and determined. The symbols on the altar flickered and dimmed, their power weakening with each word I spoke. The leader's eyes widened in shock and anger as he realized what was happening. "No!" he screamed, his voice filled with desperation. "You cannot stop this." Elliot seized the moment of distraction, disarming the leader and pinning him to the ground. With the leader subdued, I completed the counter-ritual, the symbols on the altar fading into darkness. The air grew still, and the oppressive presence of the spirits dissipated. The officers arrived, taking the cult leader into custody. As they led him away, Elliot and I exchanged a look of relief and exhaustion. We had uncovered the truth, dismantled the cult, and stopped the ritual, but the cost had been high. The scars left by the cult's actions would take time to heal, but the town of Hollow Creek could finally begin to recover. As we walked out of the church, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. The shadows that had loomed over the town seemed to lift, and a sense of peace settled over Hollow Creek. We knew that our work was far from over, But for now, we could take solace in the fact that we had brought justice to those who had suffered and helped the town take the first steps toward healing. With the cult dismantled and its members brought to justice, Elliot and I thought we had unraveled the darkest secrets of Hollow Creek. Yet, we both sensed that the threat was not fully vanquished. Something still lingered, an unresolved tension that kept us on edge. The town seemed to sigh in relief, but there was an undercurrent of unease that we couldn't ignore. The day after the confrontation at the church, Elliot and I returned to the sheriff's office to review the evidence we had collected. Sheriff Jenkins had set aside a room for us to work in, its walls lined with case files and photographs. As we examined the documents, we realized that there were still gaps in the story, pieces of the puzzle that didn't quite fit. "There's something we're missing, Miguel," Elliot said. His eyes narrowed in concentration. "The ritual, the symbols, the feud, it all points to something bigger. We need to dig deeper." Our investigation led us to the town's library, a grand old building with towering shelves filled with dusty tomes. The librarian, Miss Eleanor Wainwright, greeted us with a warm smile and a wealth of knowledge about the town's history. "How can I help you, gentlemen?" Miss Wainwright asked, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. "We're looking for any records or books that might shed light on the origins of the Carter-Harris feud and the ritual we uncovered," Elliot explained. "Anything that could help us understand the deeper roots of this conflict." Miss Wainwright led us to a secluded corner of the library, where she pulled out a collection of old, leather-bound volumes. "These books contain the town's earliest records and folklore," she said, placing them on the table. "They might have the answers you're looking for." Elliot and I spent hours poring over the books, our fingers tracing the faded ink on the pages. We discovered that the feud between the Carters and the Harrises went back even further than we had thought, to the town's founding in the early 1700s. The families had been among the first settlers, and their rivalry had been fueled by competition for land and resources. But there was more to the story. We found references to an ancient cult that had existed long before the town was established. The cult had worshipped dark spirits, performing rituals to summon their power. The symbols we had seen were part of these ancient rites, passed down through generations and adopted by the feuding families. As we delved deeper, we uncovered a chilling connection between the cult and the founding of Hollow Creek. The settlers had been drawn to the area by legends of powerful spirits that could grant them prosperity and protection. The Carters and the Harrises had embraced these beliefs, each family seeking to harness the spirit's power to outdo the other. "The feud was never just about land or resources," Elliot said, his voice filled with realization. "It was about control over the spirits, and by extension, control over the town. The rituals were a way to maintain that power." Our search for answers led us to the town's archives, where we found more evidence of the cult's influence. We uncovered records of other deaths and disappearances, all marked by the same symbols and eerie circumstances. It was clear that the cult's rituals had been performed periodically, each time leaving a trail of death and fear in their wake. One evening, as we were going through the archives, we found a hidden compartment in an old chest. Inside was a journal, its pages filled with the writings of a man named Samuel Carter, one of the town's founders. The journal detailed his descent into darkness as he became consumed by the power of the spirits. Samuel Carter had been the leader of the cult, using the rituals to strengthen his family's influence over the town. The journal described his growing obsession with the spirits and the lengths he went to maintain their favor. It also revealed a pact he had made with the spirits, a pact that had bound his descendants to the same dark path. "This journal is the key to understanding the true nature of the ritual," Elliot said, his voice filled with a mix of excitement and dread. "It explains why the feud has persisted for so long and why the deaths keep occurring. The pact Samuel Carter made with the spirits has cursed his descendants, and the ritual must be performed to keep the spirits appeased." The realization hit us like a cold wave. The recent deaths were not just the result of old grudges. They were the latest chapter in a centuries-old curse. The descendants of the Carters and the Harises were bound by the pact, and the ritual had to be performed to prevent the spirits from unleashing their wrath on the town. We knew that we had to find a way to break the curse and free the town from the spirit's grip. Our first step was to locate the descendants and convince them to help us. It was a daunting task, but Elliot's unyielding determination and my own resolve kept us focused. We visited the Carter mansion once more, this time armed with the journal and the knowledge we had gained. Mr. Jonathan Carter listened intently as we explained the true nature of the feud and the curse that had bound his family for generations. "This is beyond anything I could have imagined," Mr. Carter said, his voice filled with a mix of disbelief and fear. "What can we do to break the curse?" "The journal describes a counter-ritual," Elliot explained. "It's a dangerous undertaking, but it's our only chance to break the pact and free your family from the spirit's influence." Mr. Carter nodded, his expression resolute. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect my family and the town. Just tell me what needs to be done." With Mr. Carter's support, we turned our attention to the Harris family. Mrs. Abigail Harris was equally determined to see the curse broken. Her eyes filled with a fierce resolve as we explained the situation. "My family has suffered enough because of this feud," Mrs. Harris said, her voice steady. "If there's a way to end it, I'm willing to do whatever it takes." Working together with the descendants of the Carters and the Harises, Elliot and I prepared for the counter-ritual. We gathered the necessary ingredients and artifacts, carefully following the instructions detailed in Samuel Carter's journal. The night of the ritual, we gathered at the old church, its walls still bearing the marks of the cult's dark practices. The air was heavy with anticipation, and the tension was palpable as we prepared to perform the counter-ritual. Elliot took the lead, his voice steady and commanding as he chanted the incantations. The symbols on the altar flickered and glowed, their power slowly waning as we spoke the words of the counter-ritual. As the ritual progressed, we felt a shift in the air, a sense of release as the spirit's hold on the town weakened. The light of the symbols grew dimmer, and the oppressive presence that had haunted Hollow Creek began to fade. When the final words of the counter-ritual were spoken, a profound silence settled over the church. The symbols on the altar vanished, their power broken. The curse that had bound the Carters and the Harises for centuries was lifted, and the spirits were finally at peace. The relief was overwhelming, and the townsfolk who had gathered outside the church erupted in cheers and tears of joy. The shadows that had loomed over Hollow Creek were lifted, and a sense of peace settled over the town. Elliot and I stood together, our hearts filled with a sense of accomplishment and gratitude. We had uncovered the truth, broken the curse, and helped the town take its first steps toward healing. The journey had been long and arduous, but the reward was worth every moment. As we walked out of the church, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. The town was bathed in a warm, golden glow, and the future seemed bright for the first time in generations. We knew that our work was far from over, but for now we could take solace in the fact that we had brought justice to those who had suffered and helped Hollow Creek begin anew. With the curse broken and the spirits at peace, Hollow Creek began the slow process of healing. The shadows that had loomed over the town for generations were finally lifted, and a sense of hope and renewal spread through the community. The townsfolk, who had lived in fear for so long, could now breathe easy and look to the future with optimism. Elliot and I remained in Hollow Creek for several weeks, helping the town rebuild and offering support to those who had been affected by the cult's actions. Our bond with the community grew stronger, and we forged lasting friendships with many of the townspeople. One of our first tasks was to consecrate the ancient burial grounds. The area, once shrouded in darkness and fear, was transformed into a place of peace and remembrance. We worked alongside the townsfolk to restore the graves and erect a memorial to honor the victims of the past. As we stood together, we felt a profound sense of closure and unity. Mr. Jonathan Carter and Mrs. Abigail Harris played key roles in the town's recovery. Their determination to put an end to the feud and work together for the greater good set an example for others to follow. The reconciliation between the Carter and Harris families was a powerful symbol of hope and healing for the entire community. One evening, as the sun set over the town, Elliot and I joined Mr. Carter and Mrs. Harris for a meal at the local diner. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the tension and fear that had once gripped the town. "To new beginnings," Mr. Carter said, raising his glass in a toast. "May we never forget the lessons of the past, and may we build a brighter future for Hollow Creek." "Cheers to that," Mrs. Harris agreed, her smile radiant. "We've come a long way, and I believe the best is yet to come." As we clinked our glasses and enjoyed the meal, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of satisfaction. The journey had been long and arduous, but the reward was worth every moment. The town was healing, and the bonds we had forged would last a lifetime. In the days that followed, we continued to assist with the town's recovery efforts. We organized community events, bringing people together to celebrate and strengthen their newfound unity. The sense of camaraderie and togetherness was palpable, and it was clear that Hollow Creek was on the path to a brighter future. One afternoon, as Elliot and I walked through the town square, we noticed a group of children playing near the newly restored fountain. Their laughter and joy were infectious, and it was a heartwarming sight to see the next generation enjoying the peace that had been hard-won. "Look at them, Miguel," Elliot said, his voice filled with pride. "This is what we fought for, a future where they can grow up without fear and live their lives to the fullest." I nodded, my heart swelling with emotion. "We've done something truly special here, Elliot. We've given them a chance to write their own stories, free from the shadows of the past." As we continued our walk, we were approached by Sheriff Jenkins, who had been instrumental in helping us bring the cult to justice. His expression was one of gratitude and respect, and he extended a hand to both of us. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Vasquez," Sheriff Jenkins said, his voice sincere. "You've done more for this town than I ever could have imagined. We owe you a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid." "It was an honor to help," Elliot replied, shaking the sheriff's hand. "Hollow Creek is a special place, and we're grateful to have played a part in its recovery." The sheriff nodded, his eyes reflecting the weight of the journey we had undertaken. "The town is forever changed because of you. You've given us hope and a chance to start anew." As we parted ways with the sheriff, Elliot and I found ourselves at the edge of the town, looking out over the rolling hills and lush forests that surrounded Hollow Creek. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow over the landscape, and we took a moment to reflect on all that we had accomplished. "We've come a long way, my friend," Elliot said, his voice filled with a sense of fulfillment. "And there's still so much more to do." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. "Indeed, Elliot, the journey is far from over, but for now, we can take pride in what we've achieved here. Hollow Creek is on the path to a brighter future, and we've helped pave the way." As the days turned into weeks, the town continued to thrive. The once feuding families worked together to build a stronger, more unified community. The scars of the past were slowly healing, and the bonds between the townsfolk grew ever stronger. Elliot and I became fixtures in the community, our roles as protectors and allies firmly established. We continued to offer our support and guidance, ensuring that the town remained on the right path. The gratitude and respect we received from the townspeople were humbling, and it was clear that our efforts had made a lasting impact. One evening, as we sat on the porch of the local inn, enjoying the cool night air, Elliot turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Miguel, do you ever wonder what other mysteries and adventures await us?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. I chuckled, recognizing the familiar spark of excitement in his voice. "With you by my side, Elliot, I have no doubt that we'll encounter many more challenges and uncover countless secrets. The world is full of mysteries, and I wouldn't want to face them with anyone else." Elliot smiled, a look of determination and resolve on his face. Then let us continue our journey, my friend. Together, we'll face whatever comes our way and bring justice to those who need it most. As we gazed out at the twinkling lights of Hollow Creek, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. The town had been through so much, but it had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. Our journey had brought us here, and it had shaped us in ways we could never have imagined. With Elliot by my side, I knew that we could face any challenge and overcome any obstacle. Our bond was unbreakable, and our commitment to uncovering the truth and bringing justice to those in need was unwavering. As the stars filled the night sky, I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. The future was uncertain, but with Elliot by my side, I knew that we were ready to face whatever came our way. Together, we would continue our journey, side by side, uncovering the truths that lay hidden in the shadows and bringing light to the darkest corners of the world. As the weeks turned into months, Hollow Creek continued its transformation from a town haunted by its past to a community united in hope and renewal. The scars left by the cult's actions were healing, and the townsfolk embraced the future with optimism and determination. Elliot and I remained in the town, our presence a constant reminder of the journey we had undertaken and the battles we had fought. We were welcomed as members of the community, and our contributions were celebrated and appreciated. The gratitude we received from the townspeople was humbling, and it was clear that our efforts had made a lasting impact. One sunny afternoon, as we walked through the town square, we noticed a group of townsfolk gathered around the newly erected memorial. The memorial honored the victims of the past and served as a symbol of hope and resilience. The names of those who had suffered were etched into the stone, a reminder of the cost of the journey and the importance of unity. Mr. Jonathan Carter and Mrs. Abigail Harris stood side by side, their expressions filled with a mix of pride and reflection. They had played a crucial role in the town's recovery, and their leadership had set an example for others to follow. Their families, once bitter rivals, were now working together to build a brighter future for Hollow Creek. Elliot and I approached the memorial, joining the townsfolk in a moment of silence. The air was filled with a sense of reverence and gratitude, and it was clear that the journey we had undertaken had left a lasting legacy. As we stood together, Mrs. Harris turned to us, her eyes filled with emotion. "Thank you, Elliot Miguel. You've given us a chance to heal and to build a future free from the shadows of the past." "It was an honor to help," Elliot replied, his voice steady. "Hollow Creek is a special place, and we're grateful to have played a part in its recovery." Mr. Carter nodded, his expression resolute. "We'll never forget what you've done for us. This town owes you a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid." As the townsfolk dispersed, Elliot and I took a moment to reflect on all that we had accomplished. The journey had been long and arduous, but the reward was worth every moment. The town was healing, and the bonds we had forged would last a lifetime. In the days that followed, we continued to offer our support and guidance to the community. We organized workshops and events, bringing people together to share their skills and knowledge. The sense of camaraderie and togetherness was palpable, and it was clear that Hollow Creek was thriving. One evening, as we sat on the porch of the local inn, enjoying the cool night air, Elliot turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Miguel, do you ever wonder what other mysteries and adventures await us?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. I chuckled, recognizing the familiar spark of excitement in his voice. "With you by my side, Elliot, I have no doubt that we'll encounter many more challenges and uncover countless secrets. The world is full of mysteries, and I wouldn't want to face them with anyone else." Elliot smiled, a look of determination and resolve on his face. "Then let us continue our journey, my friend. Together, we'll face whatever comes our way and bring justice to those who need it most." As we gazed out at the twinkling lights of Hollow Creek, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. The town had been through so much, but it had emerged stronger and more united than ever before. Our journey had brought us here, and it had shaped us in ways we could never have imagined. With Elliot by my side, I knew that we could face any challenge and overcome any obstacle. Our bond was unbreakable, and our commitment to uncovering the truth and bringing justice to those in need was unwavering. As the stars filled the night sky, I took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace and fulfillment. The future was uncertain, but with Elliot by my side, I knew that we were ready to face whatever came our way. Together, we would continue our journey, side by side, uncovering the truths that lay hidden in the shadows and bringing light to the darkest corners of the world. The days passed in a blur of activity and collaboration. We worked closely with the townsfolk to ensure that the changes we had set in motion would endure. The sense of community and unity grew stronger with each passing day, and it was clear that Hollow Creek was on the path to a brighter future. One afternoon, as we walked through the town square, we were approached by a young woman named Emily Parker. Emily had been one of the most vocal advocates for the town's recovery, and her passion and dedication had inspired many. "Elliot, Miguel," Emily said, her voice filled with excitement. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for Hollow Creek. You've given us hope and a chance to rebuild our lives. I don't know where we'd be without you." "It was a team effort," Elliot replied with a warm smile. "The town has shown incredible resilience and strength. We're just glad we could help." Emily nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude. "I wanted to invite you both to a community celebration we're planning. It's a way for us to come together and celebrate how far we've come. We'd be honored if you could join us." "We'd love to," I replied, feeling a sense of warmth and pride. "Thank you, Emily. It means a lot to us." The community celebration was a joyous event, filled with laughter, music, and a sense of togetherness. The town square was transformed into a vibrant gathering place, with stalls offering food and crafts, and children playing games. The townsfolk mingled and shared stories, their faces alight with happiness and hope. Elliot and I moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and making new friends. The atmosphere was electric, and it was clear that the town was united in its determination to build a brighter future. As the sun set and the stars began to twinkle in the sky, the celebration reached its peak. Mr. Carter and Mrs. Harris took to the stage, their expressions filled with pride and gratitude. "We are here today to celebrate not just the past, but the future," Mr. Carter said, his voice steady and strong. "Hollow Creek has faced many challenges, but we have emerged stronger and more united than ever before. This is our moment to honor the journey we've undertaken and to look forward to the bright future that awaits us." Mrs. Harris nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. "We owe a debt of gratitude to Elliot Brooks and Miguel Vasquez. Their unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth and bringing justice to our town has made all of this possible. They have given us hope and a chance to heal, and for that, we will be forever grateful." The crowd erupted in applause, and Elliot and I exchanged a look of pride and fulfillment. The journey had been long and challenging, but the reward was worth every moment. The town was healing, and the bonds we had forged would last a lifetime. As the celebration continued into the night, Elliot and I found a quiet spot to reflect on all that we had accomplished. The stars filled the sky, and the air was filled with the sounds of laughter and joy. "We've come a long way, my friend," Elliot said, his voice filled with a sense of fulfillment. "And there's still so much more to do." I nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose. "Indeed, Elliot, the journey is far from over, but for now, we can take pride in what we've achieved here. Hollow Creek is on the path to a brighter future, and we've helped pave the way." As we gazed out at the twinkling lights of the town, I felt a deep sense of gratitude and purpose. The future was uncertain, but with Elliot by my side, I knew that we were ready to face whatever came our way. Together, we would continue our journey, side by side, uncovering the truths that lay hidden in the shadows and bringing light to the darkest corners of the world.